All right, so I'm back with my final thoughts on two fragrances that I did initial impressions on not too long ago here. And these are going to be Legion from Fragrance World as well as Nudo Exotic Flowers. So both of these fragrances, I can definitely say I absolutely enjoy the smell of both of these. Obviously, with the Nudo Exotic Flowers, I absolutely despise this bottle. But overall, man, I would say that the just the smell of both fragrances are really, really high quality, and they are extremely good. So, just to kind of get started with Legion, Legion, in terms of like the smell comparison between this and Oajan, in the initial opening, I feel like that's really where you kind of notice the main difference between the two fragrances. Oajan for sure is definitely a lot more kind of balanced in terms of its blend. All right. So with Oajan, that one to me, I'm not getting more sort of honey than I am anything else, or I'm not getting more spice than I am anything else. It's very kind of balanced, sort of right down the middle. Whereas with Legion, you're gonna get a lot more honey, I would say, than anything else, at least in the initial opening. From the two fragrances. So Legion for sure is gonna be heavier on the honey, and I would say that lasts for maybe like around the first 2 to 3 minutes or so. So I mean, it's not really even something that lasts for like a significant amount of time. But it is definitely something like when you kind of go, side by side and you smell them, you can definitely tell that the honey is a lot more prominent in this one, comes off as a little bit more thicker than what the Oajan does. Now, after about that sort of 2 to 3 minute mark, as the two fragrances are starting to really kind of settle down, then that's when the differences are like almost indistinguishable from each other. Now to me, Legion is maybe slightly, stronger than what Oajan is. I've kind of wore the two fragrances several times, and some days it seems like Legion is, some days it just seems like they're about the same. So I think it just all kind of depends. But at least several times I felt like Legion was a little bit stronger in terms of how it was projecting, as compared to Oajan from Parfums de Marly. So this fragrance, man, overall I would say is definitely pretty good, man. It's very, very close to the original fragrance. And I'm starting to see that the fragrances that Fragrance World have done, the sort of Parfums de Marly inspirations that they've done in this particular bottle style. So this one, Hartnell, Midori, they all seem to be like really, really good interpretations of the fragrance that they're going after. Midori, when compared to Aether Extrait, was definitely you could tell that there was a slight sort of difference. But even when I smelled Midori next to the original, Parfums de Marly Greenly, there was barely, any sort of difference that I could notice. I think at least with the bottle of Midori that I had, I could kind of tell that there was like a slight quality difference, you could say. But just in terms of like the overall smell, it was very, very close to the Parfums de Marly. And then, same thing with this one. I would even say that in terms of quality, like the difference is less noticeable in this than what it is in something like Midori. So, I mean, that's really, really, surprising, I would say, for this one. But yeah, overall, Legion is a very, very solid interpretation of Oajan. If you like that really sort of spicy, sweet, almost you could say kind of slightly boozy apple pie sort of smell that you get from the fragrance. But again, you really do have to like really, really spicy fragrances, because you get blasted with basically like cinnamon and honey, within the sort of initial spray of this fragrance. Now, if I'm going to give, or actually just to kind of go over the performance of this fragrance, performance on Legion is solid. So you're going to easily get over 8 hours of, total longevity out of this fragrance. And then in terms of the projection, like I said, on some instances, seems like this, actually projects a little bit better than what Oajan does. And then in some instances, it seems about the same. But you are going to get very good projection, at least like an arm's length or so, for at least about the first hour and a half to 2 hours. So really, really solid on the performance. And then in terms of like an overall closeness rating, I mean, I would say this one has got to be like 97% close, pretty much 97, 98% close to Oajan. It's extremely close. And I mean, really, I would say for the price that Oajan still goes for, and also the fact that, that fragrance is, has been reformulated, and, kind of watered down a little bit in recent years. To me, Legion just makes a lot more sense, man. Now, obviously, for some people, they're not going to like the fact that this bottle looks exactly like, a Parfums de Marly bottle. So some people are not going to like that presentation. But, at least for me anyway, I don't mind it. And again, I mean, the juice inside here is extremely close. So like I said, I would give this one about a 97, 98%. And then just in terms of like an overall rating, in terms of how I like this fragrance overall, this to me is like a solid 8 out of 10. I know a lot of people do kind of compare this to, By Kilian's Angel Share. There is a slight kind of similarity, but to me, they're two completely different scents. This is definitely a lot spicier and thicker, than what Angel Share is. And definitely it's a lot more masculine, in my opinion, than, what Angel Share is. This fragrance, I don't prefer over Angel Share, but I do still really like the way that this smells. Especially for, those really sort of cooler winter days. This is a very sort of warm fragrance. So definitely, again, I would give this one like an 8 out of 10 for sure, in terms of my overall rating. And that's my sort of overall thoughts on Legion, man. I absolutely recommend this one if you're a big fan of Parfums de Marly Oajan, but you don't want to spend $200-300 on, for a bottle of that fragrance. All right. So moving on to Nudo Exotic Flowers. This is going to be Fragrance World's take on, what is it? Narcotic Delight from Initio. And this fragrance, when I smelled it side by side with Narcotic Delight, there was definitely some differences that I could tell in this fragrance. Narcotic Delight, you can absolutely tell, is the more sort of higher quality, more expensive, fragrance. But this still comes very close to it. Now, the way that the opening is done, this fragrance, especially when you look at the note breakdown, I believe the initial sort of top notes of this are not necessarily cherry. I believe it's just like red fruits or something like that. And that is definitely more kind of what this smells like. Now, it does still have like a cherry sort of feel to it. So it smells like, I would say cherries mixed with probably like raspberries and other sort of, red fruits. Whereas the Narcotic Delight, that does smell more of sort of like a natural sort of cherry smell. So that's the main difference, I would say, that I noticed between the Nudo Exotic Flowers and, the Narcotic Delight, was that definitely had a more sort of naturalistic cherry smell to it. And then also too, the florals, the way that the florals came across in Narcotic Delight, they smelled a lot more natural than what they do in the Nudo Exotic Flowers. So Nudo Exotic Flowers, definitely the florals in this do come off as sweeter and more kind of synthetic smelling. But at least for me anyway, from my taste, I actually do prefer the way that this smells over the Narcotic Delight. The Narcotic Delight, even though the florals, they smell more natural smelling. To me, they came off of my skin as smelling a little bit more kind of like earthy. Whereas this came off as smelling a little bit more kind of artificial and sweeter. Like I said, at least for my taste anyway, I actually preferred that a little bit more in this fragrance than what I did the Narcotic Delight. Both fragrances are really solid, and this does come very close to Narcotic Delight just overall. But again, if you are, I would say definitely if you're like a niche snob and you've smelled Narcotic Delight first and then you go in, to smell this one, you'll definitely probably, kind of put this one to the side and say, yeah, I'll just keep my Narcotic Delight. But, I think if you kind of go into this and you haven't smelled either one and, you're just kind of taking each fragrance for what it is, depending on, what your preferences are, you may like the Nudo Exotic Flowers a little bit more, or you may like the Narcotic Delight a little bit more. It just all kind of depends. But at least for me anyway, I'm pretty happy with the way that the Nudo Exotic Flowers smells. I didn't smell the Narcotic Delight and immediately say to myself like, oh yeah, I have to go out and buy like a bottle of the original Initio. I didn't really get that feeling, when smelling the original after I had smelled the Nudo Exotic Flowers. So again, man, it just all kind of depends on the person. For some people, they are going to feel like that. They are going to feel like they want to go out and still get the original. And if that's you, that's fine. But at least for me, I do really enjoy the way that this smells. Now for the performance on this it's pretty good. I mean, the overall longevity is like right around 8 hours or so. I got a little bit more longevity out of the Initio, but the performance on this so far has been, pretty solid. Now, this may get stronger and better, over time as this one kind of sits and maturates. But as of right now, like I said, longevity wise, I'm getting about 8 hours with it. And then for the projection on the Initio was also definitely better. The projection on the Nudo Exotic Flowers to me seems to be a little bit more kind of on the softer side, especially compared to the Initio. Now, the Initio Narcotic Delight, that's not going to be as loud as something like Side Effect. That also comes in like the purple bottle. It's not going to be as thick and as heavy and as loud as what that fragrance is, but it is still, to me, stronger than what the Nudo Exotic Flowers is. This to me is about average when it comes to projection. So I mean, it's not going to be like a super loud fragrance. This is going to be a little bit closer to your skin, more sort of like a more intimate, personal type of scent. But again, it is still very, very good, man. I will say that. It just overall, I would say if you like unisex, cherry, floral types of scents, this is going to be right up your alley. In the dry down, it does also have like a sort of woodiness to it as well. But this is definitely, I would say, one of the sort of best kind of unisex cherry style scents that you can, that you can smell. Cherry and florals for the most part. Like, even though this one, from Fragrance World's perspective, it looks like they're marketing this fragrance as more of like a women's scent. This to me does not, it doesn't smell like a super feminine scent. I would say it's very much kind of straight down the middle unisex. Maybe some people could slightly say that this leans a little bit feminine. I don't necessarily get that from this one. But I could see how some people probably would say that, especially if they wear, more kind of like super spicy or super leathery, oudy sort of scents. Maybe for those people, this is going to be a little bit more on the feminine side. But I would say if you wear a lot of unisex scents, or like if you wear, a lot of scents that, incorporate florals in them already, then this is still going to be right up your alley for sure. All right. So that's the performance in terms of my sort of overall closeness rating to Narcotic Delight. This one I would say is like around that kind of 80 to 85% mark. So, it's not going to be like completely off from Narcotic Delight, but it's also not going to be exactly the same. All right. And then in terms of just my overall rating on this one, I would have to easily give this one probably like a 8.5 to 8.7 out of 10. So, really, really solid fragrance, man. Nudo Exotic Flowers to me is going to be definitely a springtime scent. I could also see this one being worn in like the early fall, in like the late winter for the most part. So I wouldn't necessarily wear this one like in the like the middle of winter, or like the coldest part of winter, because this does seem to wear very kind of close to my skin. And then at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily wear this one in the summertime either, because I just think at least wearing this here in Las Vegas, this would probably give me a headache. Even though it's not like a super thick or loud scent, I just couldn't see myself really wearing this one in the summertime and 100-degree heat. So that's my take on Nudo Exotic Flowers. Definitely let me know what you all think about both of these fragrances if you have them. What do you all think about Legion? Do you think that this is almost identical to Oajan? And then also for Nudo Exotic Flowers, do you think that this is not necessarily the closest interpretation of Narcotic Delight, but a very solid one, especially for the price? So let me know in the comments below. Also, I'll have links in the description to where you can pick up both of these fragrances. And again, if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see you on the next video.